What it do, y'all, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I'm so excited to bring you guys another video in my palette roundup series. This will be the first palette roundup of the year, and today I have 7 palettes that I want to talk to you guys about. These are palettes that I have been testing out from last year to this year, and some I just recently kind of got my final thoughts. So I'm so excited to talk to you guys about these. I believe all of these are, every last palette in this video will be completely independently owned. So I love supporting smaller owned brands or big brands that just happen to be independently owned. But yeah, let's just go ahead and dive on into the palettes. And then of course at the end, we will end it with a ranking as per usual. If you're interested in this makeup look, I did record it. It will be coming up. I don't know the order in which these videos are going up, but I will have it linked down below when it is available. And I will also just have all of the items listed and linked down below that are on my face in case you're just interested in one particular item that you see on my face. So I'm just going to go from the top as I always do, and then at the end we will do the actual ranking. So the order in which I present these palettes doesn't have any value right now. The first palette is actually the palette that is on my eyes today, and this is the Fighter palette from Fenty Cosmetica. This is my first palette from the brand, and I was just really excited for this palette. This was a palette that just screamed like it was a lot more up my color scheme and my, my interest than previous palettes they have released have been. I've truly stuck to these more warmer toned mattes. I can say I have not touched this gray, and I probably will never touch that gray, which is perfectly fine, but I have dipped into all of the shimmers and all of the mattes outside of the gray, and I will say that these are really good products. I think that the formula isn't necessarily as thick and opaque as some other formulas that I do tend to fancy. If you couldn't tell, I'll tell you the mattes that are on my eyes today. I actually have Valor on the outside edges. Marshall is the majority of my outer V and inner corner. I tried to do like a kind of halo eye, and then I deepened the inner and outer corners with Warrior. So, this matte formula to me is not so thick and opaque that you can really see the drastic difference between them. It might be my technique, so definitely take this of course with a grain of salt, and check out other creators that have had this palette that are similar skin tone if you're my skin tone. But I still do like the formula. Not my favorite matte formula by any means, but it's still a solid matte formula, and I think depending on how you want your eye look to look, and very simple looks with this particular palette, you can get them, and I've been able to get them. I've done multiple looks with this palette, and I think I've showcased it multiple times on my channel at this point. The shimmers are really interesting. They're not so opaque that you can't sheer them out, which I appreciate. They're definitely a lot more on the kind of more modern shimmer than like what they used to be, which they used to be a lot more like metallic shimmers in general. These shimmers are a little bit more kind of flaky in a way. They're not actually flaky. They're more shimmer based in a way that you can sheer them out or make them opaque, whichever you want, but it is a thin formula, so it's not very heavy on the eyes. I really like this formula of the shimmers a lot more than the mattes, but I like this palette. I'm very happy to have tried this palette. It's a nice heavy palette, and yeah, I really like it so far. This, like I said, is the first palette that I've tried. They are sneak peeking that they're coming out with a new one, so maybe that one will be up my alley as well, or maybe they've already revealed it. I can't honestly remember. So much is going on, but I'm very happy that I was able to try the Fighter palette nonetheless. Next is a palette that was actually sent to me, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm giddy that it was sent to me. So there may be some lack of objectiveness here, but I feel like I'm been pretty objective with this particular palette. This is the What's Up Beauty Dragon Eye palette, and it's a very pretty palette. So you have quite a few shades here. You have 12 shades where it looks like about half, 2, 4, 5. So 5 shades are matte, so that makes about 7 shades. Yeah, that should be right. 7 shades are shimmers. I would prefer a lot more mattes to shimmers, but not my palette, so I can't really say too much on that. The formulas, though, are definitely different than the Fantasy. So I find that these mattes are a lot thicker, in my opinion, a little bit more up my alley when it comes to thickness and opacity. But with that said, that these definitely have kick up. So if you're not a fan of kick up, just keep that in mind. This definitely does have kick up, but what it brings and kick up, I find it still applies an opacity on the eyes. I've been able to blend these beautifully. I've made quite a few variety of color schemes here with the mattes, and I do appreciate that. So even though it's not necessarily as many mattes as I tend to want in my palettes, I've still been able to curate my base part of my eyeshadow look to still have some interesting color schemes going on. As for the shimmers, they have a slight creaminess to them that I like. Once again, it is more on this like more modern kind of shimmery eyeshadow product where you can make it opaque, but you can sheer it out. These all pretty much have the same formula, and although they in one spot may look like it's going to be just a boring metallic, they all have some form of shimmer running throughout. Not glitter, definitely not glitter, but a shimmer running throughout that adds a layer to the actual eyeshadow that makes it a little bit more unique, that can make it so that it may look like it's a really warm tone, but maybe the shimmer is very cool, so it applies differently and it looks differently overall. So I find that this palette, I get a little bit more, let's say, fun in. Of course, there are different colors than the Fighter, completely different colors, but I find that it's not so straightforward as I have found the Fighter to be. Once again, nothing is bad. I will say all of the quality on all of these palettes are really, really good. I'm just kind of speaking my perspective and my experience. And this one I found it's taken me a little bit longer to kind of get the colors that I see to be associated on my eye and understand which colors go with what in this palette. I really like the palette though. Do not get that misunderstood. Next is a luxury palette, and this is my Winggos palette. I picked this up last year during the Beautylish gift card event, I want to say. I really wanted to try more Winggos, so I did. And this one is the Tourmaline palette. Now this one is like a kind of neutrally burgundy-esque palette. This is beautiful. This is really, really beautiful. The mattes are astoundingly beautiful. Really nice saturation. I really like the formula. It's a silkier matte, so not as powdery, definitely silky. I don't find that I get any kick up at all. You do have these like more satin type shades in here as well, which I find actually work better than what I remember satins working. Maybe it's my technique, maybe it's the formula, I don't really know, but I do really like the two satins in here. Then he has this like more kind of glittery, chunkier kind of shimmer. This one I don't find is as thick as the other two shimmers here. This one I find is more of like a pressed flakes that when you put them on the brush or on your finger, they kind of present in a more opaque singular color, if that makes sense. Whereas the other two palettes, what I've referenced, is more of you have a base pigment with shimmers running throughout. This is the base pigment is like the pressed flakes that you can create to make one color. So I actually really like this palette. I've used it multiple times, and now that I've reviewed it, I hope to use it even more. It creates very interesting kind of sultry, beautiful, you know, whimsically kind of looks, in my opinion. Very elegant. I think that's the word that I would call this palette. It is an elegant palette, and in my collection there are not many, so I'm very happy to have that in my collection. So let's talk about the Glaminatrix Rich Romantics palette. This is a palette that they came out with last year. I think they had to, because I didn't pick this up this year. I can't distinctly remember what holiday this was about. Maybe this was around Valentine's Day last year. I really don't know, but I couldn't have gotten it very long ago because I'm just now able to review it. As always, I love their mattes. Their mattes are very pigmented, very blendable. All of these mattes are blendable, if I did not say that prior. And I find that these don't have nearly as much kick up as some of their Glaminatrix palettes do. They kind of go through a different formula sometimes on their palettes, from each palette to each palette. So I found that. But with the shimmers are once again back to that kind of creamy nature where it's very creamy. It's not as creamy as some of the palettes, but it is creamy nonetheless. And I find that because it has that cream, it's a creamier version, I would say, of the Winggos formula, in my opinion, where it's like a pressed flaky formula with so much cream that it looks opaque, and it still gives you that like shimmer running throughout as well. It's just a very, very beautiful formula. I really like Glaminatrix formula. I have quite a few palettes from them, and you know, I love their products. So yeah, nothing to disregard on this palette from this brand. I definitely think that if you're interested in the color scheme, you should definitely go ahead and try this particular palette because it really is a nice palette overall. Another great palette is coming from Danielle Myrix. This is her Groundwork palette, and this is her Defining Neutrals one. So I'm so excited, as I've said in another video, that she's coming out with others, but I want to talk about this one. If you look really closely on my palette, you'll see that there are some shades that I just haven't touched, and that is purely because of the tones. I don't really reach for those, at least right now. I've really been sticking with these darker tones here. I will reach for this lighter tone as well. And I think I've also reached for Sculpted, but really these top four here are a lot cooler in nature and lighter in nature that I'm just not gonna naturally reach for them. But the formulas here are just so unique, so interesting. I really, really like them. So if you did not know, the bigger pan is the cream and the smaller pan is the powder. The powders are extremely prone to kick up. So if you're not a fan of that, just please know that they are extremely known to kick up, at least in the way that I pick up my products. They are powdery in my opinion, and I find that these powders are just best to set the creams. I don't particularly enjoy using the powders on their own. I don't find that they have enough binder in them to really set and really show up as beautifully as they do when I put the creams down first. So that is my perspective. I've also tried them with other cream bases, and there's something about, I think, the thinness of the mattes, and like I said, the powderiness of them, that it just does not have enough pigment running throughout that it can really keep the color for an eyeshadow look. So I prefer to use the creams 100% and then the powders. I have used just the creams. I do find that they don't necessarily set down long term. So if you're somebody who you're okay with your eyeshadow kind of creasing and then you just tapping through, this is definitely something you can do. This is a palette that you can use all over your face though. So I have particularly only used it on my eyes. That's how I bought it. That's how I intend to use it. I truly have not tried using it throughout the other zones of my face. But if I did, I would probably reach for a combination of Harvest and Bark as a bronzer. And that would probably be the only thing. I don't really contour. So that's that. The only kind of downside to using this as a face product is that the pans are so small. I mean, I can't really get a face product brush in these pans. The last thing I want to say is that if you look at the packaging, you can see that these are potentially removable. I haven't tried, but now I'm trying, and you can clearly see that I was able to remove that pan without any real issue, just with my finger very quickly. So I like that. I have not seen yet that there are refillable pans available. I think that would be a nice touch to add to her site. Maybe not to Sephora. I doubt that Sephora would want to kind of stock that. But maybe just having that accessible. I'm sure she made that kind of aspect because, of course, Danielle Myrix is a makeup artist, and a lot of makeup artists really like Z palettes because you can put a lot of products in there and you can just run throughout the products very quickly, especially because, like I said, these are creams. I will state that because these are the type of cream that they are, it doesn't bother me that the creams are very close to the powders. These are not an overly, it's not like a cream blush, right? It is a lot more drier in nature. It's more, think of a putty formula. That if you think of like a face putty formula that you've tried where you can put your hand in it and you can move it around a little, you can feel a little moisture, but it doesn't feel overly creamy, it doesn't feel overly dry. That's the type of texture in those creams. And because of that, it's not like the cream is really picking up the powder. And once again, because that powder is so airy and so thin, it's not really affecting the creams either. So I find that the combination of those products is great, and I can't wait to see the subsequent more other like variations of this palette that Danielle Myrix comes out with. I think she really has found a unique formula that can really bring some innovation and just intrigue to the industry for those who already have a lot of products. Two more palettes to talk about. The second to last one that I want to talk about is from DD Signature. This is my first palette from the brand, and this is their classic autumn palette. And this palette is really, really nice. So a lot of people loved this palette, and of course this brand in what? I think it was 2022, because I want to say they took pretty much 2023 off, or maybe there was the first year that this brand launched, a lot of people loved them. Then they took about a year off, and now they are back and rolling. Okay, they are rolling. And I must say, I really like this palette. I like the textures in the mattes. The mattes are pigmented, they're blendable, opaque. That's definitely something that I enjoy. The shimmers are a lot thicker than I would have honestly expected, and not a huge fan of all of them. I don't find that they're all the same formula. This Star Apple has a little bit of shimmer in it, and I find that that shimmer kind of breaks up the thickness of this metallic formula. And that's what I want to say. I want to say that these are a more traditional metallic formula that we have used in the past. Beautiful formula, beautiful shades, don't get me wrong, but it is nonetheless that metallic formula. So if you apply it to your lids and your lids have a little bit more lines and wrinkles, this may be a little bit too thick of a formula for you. This mushroom shade to me is more of like a flake pressed again, where it's going to show up thicker, but it's not going to show up as kind of singular dimensional as these four shades over here. I like this palette, I really do. And yeah, I will continue to keep my eye out on the brand. Who knows, I may pick up some more from them. And then the last one is one that I have been like somewhat testing out since Native American History Month last year. And this is the Sagrado palette, and this is from Prado's Beauty. So Prado's Beauty is one of, I would say, the most well-known indigenous or Native American owned beauty brands, and I was really excited to try them out last year. And this is the palette that I'd picked up. I thought that this was one that I would want to keep hopefully for a long period of time. The mattes are astounding. I absolutely love the mattes in this palette. They're great. They're pigmented, they're blendable, opaque, all of that. The shimmers are honestly not my favorite at all. And that could be a deciding factor for how long this palette stays in my collection. The way I've gotten use out of this palette is I will do my more kind of one eyeshadow look where I'll do a bunch of mattes on my crease and on my lid, and I'll take a shimmer and I'll put it in my inner corner. That is the way that I've gotten use out of this palette and enjoyed this palette. Otherwise though, unfortunately, I just really am not a huge fan of the shimmer formula in this particular palette. But outside of that, it's nice. It's really, really nice. It's a good formula. It's just not great. When you're looking at this pile of palettes and eyeshadows and just in general my collection, this formula eyeshadow of the shimmer is not my preferred. I do prefer a little bit more sparkly, thinner formula, whereas though this is not as thick as the DD Signature, it's just not as unique, sparkly as the WhatsApp, if that makes sense. So, you know, there is that. So what I'm going to do really quickly is just get these all in order based on my opinions and ranking, and honestly how much I think I'm going to use these palettes in the future. Yeah, as I always like to say, at least for the last couple of roundups, because it's been true, all of these are good palettes. They're all really good quality. There's not a bad product here, but there are ones that work better for my skin tone, my wants, my needs, all of that. So yeah, let's get into the ranking. So like I said, I'm taking into consideration the likelihood that I'm going to wear these products, again, use them consistently, as well as my enjoyment of the actual formulas. And for that reason, coming in at number 7, I'm going to unfortunately be giving it to the Fantasy Cosmetica Fighter palette. The mattes here are the thinnest, and they're just, to me, they're not a formula that I love compared to the mattes in every other palette here, which is interesting now that I think about it, because the Danielle Myrix mattes are not opaque either. But yeah, this is how I did it, so we're going to stick with it. This is coming in at number 7. As I said before, still a great quality palette. I love the packaging and all of that. It just, to me, this is where it had to stay. Next, unfortunately, I'm going to be giving it to the Prados Beauty. I love the matte formula here. I really do. But I feel constricted in the types of looks that I want to create with this palette because of the shimmer formula. So this had to come in at number 6. So yeah, unfortunately, it's number 6. Coming in at number 5 is DD's Signature, the Classic Autumn palette. I love the matte formula. That's why it stayed up in this, but it's the shimmers. To me, the shimmers are just not my preferred formula. Some are a little thick, some are a little one-noted, and to me, just none of the shimmers really hit it all the way out the ballpark. So for me, this had to come in at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is the Winggos Tourmaline palette. I really like this palette. This palette has such an understated luxury and beauty to it, and that's why it was able to jump up. I mean, if we're being honest, I like the different textures. We have different finishes, and yeah, this is just the classiness to this palette that it just can't be matched with all the others. So it had to go to number 4. Alrighty guys, so only 3 products left, and I'll tell you guys the name. Of course, as always, go ahead and stop this video and comment down below the order in which you think these palettes are gonna be. It's the Glaminatrix Rich Romantics palettes, the Danielle Myrix Groundwork palette, and then the What's Up Beauty Dragon palette. So those are the 3 palettes that I have left, and in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's just get into number 3. Coming in at number 3, purely because of the color scheme, is the Glaminatrix Rich Romantics palette. Like I've said before, I love the colors. I do like the color scheme here. I love the formulas in this palette, both the mattes and the shimmers, more metallic, flaky goodness here. But this color scheme, I honestly don't see me reaching for it very often. I really don't reach for these kind of brighter pinks, purples consistently anymore, but I wanted to have this in my collection because I love collecting this brand's palette, so that's why I picked it up. So I'm not mad I have it, but it's not one I think I'm gonna reach for more than the top 2. Coming in at number 2 is the What's Up Beauty Dragon palette. Once again, I'm so thankful for the brand to have sent this to me, and I've been loving it, and I think I will continue to love this actual product. But I think that the amount of times that I'm going to reach for this palette is when I want to do a full look with this, right? Which I think is of course great, and I'm sure I'm going to be reaching for it more, but I don't think I'm going to be reaching for it as much as I'm going to be reaching for the next palette, which is of course the Groundwork palette. This is just one of those basic staples, those palettes that you can just keep on your desk. You can automatically get a crease work, you can automatically get an eye base action, and I think I'm just gonna reach for this palette objectively more because it's more basics, it's more essentials compared to the What's Up Beauty and of course all of the other subsequent palettes. So yeah, that's why this palette got the #1 spot, although like I said, it's a little kind of interesting that I decided to put this so high, even though I don't particularly like the matte formula in this palette, at least not alone. But combined with the creams in that palette, I think they really can do something interesting. So with that said, that is my latest palette roundup. I will of course have my palette roundup series down below, and in case you're interested in seeing previous palette roundups that I have done, go ahead and check out that video or that playlist. And with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.